everybody, welcome to Stonx Music. My name's Ollie and today we're going to be having a look at making a bass using every Ableton stock effect at once. Let's go! Right, so here we are back in Ableton and this is what we ended up with. This big old massive stuff here, and this is what it sounds like. So let's have a look at what we started with. So I've got this operator here and we've just got two saw waves and nothing set on the envelopes. They're just straight up attacking. And then we've duplicated that here and we've set it an octave up and messed with the tone a little bit. So let's have a listen. And the second one. And then back here we've got our sub bass added in as well. So let's mute the sub bass and just have a look at the operators. So we've got these two. And we started off with an amp. Good bit of crisp. Auto filter for some movement. And then we ran into our first problem, and that is that the auto pan drastically changes the sound, right? And I didn't want that to persist through everything, so I've made this rack and kind of split it into a few different things. So next up, we have our beat repeat, and I've just used the Max for Live shaper to turn it on and off continuously, so we get this. It's just kind of a glitchy, grainy sound. And then we've got our cabinet, near off axis dynamic and in mono, and then at the bottom here we've got our dry. So all together turns into, it's just got a good few more bits of like flingy around stuff. Next up we've put our splitter where we've got our multiband dynamics, high, mid and low, and on the highs we've got a chorus and a delay, really short delay time just to kind of give us some of that slap back kind of sound. On our mids we've put a corpus, give it that kind of pipey tubey sound, and on the low end we've got nothing at all. So altogether this starts giving it a good bit more space. Next up, we've got a bit of New York compression. So we've just got our channel EQ, dip in the mids, and smashing it through a compressor. And then we've got our dry signal as well. Next up is the drum bass, and we're just using a little bit of drive, transient shaper, and the boom, just to add a bit more of that G note in there. Next up, dynamic tube, just add again another bit of distortion. And next up we've got an echo, and we've got quite a high feedback, but we are carving away what's actually happening, and our dry wet is quite low. So that's just going to give us, again, short delay time, just going to give us that kind of slappy back feel. After that, we've got this audio effect, which is just a bunch of EQ3s, and we're just using them for coloration. I've not even touched them, I just added them all in. There's definitely a difference. Listen to with and without. That's a bit of like a weird attack onto the beginning, which is really quite nice. Next up we've got erosion, which is just a bit of dirt, a bit of wide noise. After that, we've got our filter delay. So you can just hear a bit of space that's being added. After this, we've got our flanger. Just giving us a good bit of movement. Followed by our frequency shifter in ring mode. Now, this is a real weird one, but it does work. hear that spread, it really makes it a good bit bigger. All of that is then getting shoved through a glue compressor. Now we've got that big heavy attack on the front. Next up we've got our grain delay, and again, because this one's so crazy, I've used the dry wet, but I've just separated it instead of using the dry wet off the effect. So I've got a full dry channel and our grain delay. Let's have a listen. So again, just more of these high frequency kind of stuttery noises. So together we've got this. After that, a choice bit of overdrive. I just felt like this section here needed a bit more. Again, very small dry wet, but it all adds up over time. So the fun thing I've done with this overdrive is I've put a couple of envelope followers, and they are just moving with the frequency and the drive amounts. Have a look. It just makes a bit of bass come through at the beginning. It kind of rooms it up. After that, we've got a pedal. Low dry wet, but again, just more gain, more distortion. Phaser, moving this stuff around again. Followed by an EQ8 in mid-side mode, just doing a bit of tidying up. Followed by a redux, and again, I've done the dry wet trick. So the redux is this. And a big old bit crushy sound, and our dry coming through too. After this, we've got our resonator set to B mode because we're using low noises, and I've set the main note here to a macro. So depending what note you want to do, if you wanted to resample this, you've got that at the beginning here, and this just gives us a nice. That's what's being added. After our resonator, we've got a saturator. After our saturator, we've got another saturator, this one doing some wave shaping. After that, we've got our vinyl distortion, just doing our odd harmonics down here. And our vocoder, which I'm just using simply as a bit of an EQ to tame those highs. So after that, we've got our gated reverb, which is just a big old reverb and a gate. Kind of working like a dimension expander, just kind of making it a bit bigger. And our compressor, which is set up sidechain mode, which we could set to our kick drum. Another EQ8. And this one is just doing some choice scooping and boosting. Bit more low end there, getting rid of some of that boxiness and adding a bit of the 1K. Followed by a limiter, just pushing it in there a little bit. Not too much. And a utility bass mono right at the end here. So, that's our sound. I felt like it was still lacking in the lows, so I added our sub in, so that gets pushed into the processing, and that gives us this. Big. So I've taken that bass here, taken a big old thick G note, sampled that out, and chucked it into a bunch of samplers up here. So once we go into our sample mode, we can set that to G0 and start doing some frequency modulation and setting up all of these LFOs to kind of move stuff around and create another sound. So here it is through the first iteration of resampling. You can hear the pitch envelope at the beginning giving even more smack, and then just as the filters move around, we have this triangle frequency modulation being fed in. Over time, it does it here on the auxiliary, and the volume of that oscillator just kind of builds up. So our different iterations that we've got here, I've just changed what is being added in the frequency modulation and added some auto pans to kind of give it some. And the next one here, same again, just changed it, messed around with a few of these things and changed the auto filter. And last but not least, so once you've got these massive sounds, even though we used every single effect, you can still push it further by resampling it through Sampler. So let's have a listen to what we ended up with. And that is it pretty much. Alright everyone, that'll do it for this episode of Deep Dive. Quick disclaimer to anyone who is new to making these big, fat, nasty neuro basses. This is not necessarily the way to do it. Don't go around thinking you have to use every single audio effect. It was just meant to be a bit of fun. Nevertheless, I'm quite happy with this bass and I'm probably going to use it in a couple of tracks. So if you want to get your hands on it, as always, project files available down there in the description. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more of these videos. Next up, we're going to be tackling Ableton's stock instruments. So until next time, keep making music. Bye!